If you've got a case, present it. If you don't have a case, shut up. It's that simple. Second level of rebellion is complaining. Now, it's a little bit different from murmuring, because murmuring is done sort of under the breath, and complaining is verbalizing. It's more confrontational. You actually say things to God or maybe to other people. The book of Numbers says when the Israelites were in the wilderness, the rabble with them began to crave other food. Now that's important. They had plenty to eat, but the rabble began to crave other food. And again, the Israelites started wailing and said, if only we had meat to eat. We want meat. We want meat. We want meat. And everybody was saying it. Now that's murmuring. There was actually nothing wrong with what they had to eat. God was meeting their needs. But Satan placed in them a certain amount of dissatisfaction. And you know, while I was gone this week and preparing sermon ideas and thoughts for next year, one of the things that kept bothering me greatly was this particular verse of Scripture, of how easily dissatisfied we are with all the things we have. And we want other things. We want more things. The basis of our complaining and the basis of the Israelites' complaining was nothing more than personal preference. I'd rather have meat than to eat manna. But I remember a day when manna was great because it kept me from being hungry. I remember the day I got my first old beat-up car. I didn't have to walk. But would I be satisfied with that car today? Even though it would still get me from point A to point B? And see, this complaining has a way of getting out of hand, because as you look at the Israelites, it says they were wailing. They were crying out loud. And you know, that is, in light of the last sermon that I preached here, that is so typical of us Americans. The rest of the world looks at us and says, give me a break. I'd trade places with you any day. I'd love to have your clothes. I'd love to have your car. I'd love to have this wonderful church. Man, if I could just go to church. The hardest part of being a pastor is dealing with personal preference. I'm going to be honest with you. And when I went to church last Sunday morning, I sat there and, I looked at everything and I thought how different this is from Ridgedale. The only people who had on coats and ties were the ushers. They stood at the door, and I don't know if this was an assigned thing or not, but they were easy to spot. So that made it nice if you wanted to ask an usher for a question or whatever, because he was dressed that way. Everybody else, very casual. They were in shorts and sandals and jeans, but they were there. Personal preference. Now, I'm from the old school. I like the tie and the coat. But as long as I can remember that there's nowhere in the Bible that says I have to wear a tie and a coat, and remember that it is a personal preference. Most of the problems that begin to divide Christians, believers, brothers and sisters, is simply the problem of personal preference. Good example that we have here at Ridgedale is Sunday night. 60% of you never come to church on Sunday night. So I don't know what you think about it. 30% of you don't want to come on church on Sunday night, and you're very specific. I don't think we should have it. That's 90%. That leaves about 10% that think we ought to have church on Sunday night. And it's hard as a pastor because I grew up with church on Sunday night. But it's hard as a pastor to lead with you and say, what can we do that is very effective in this time, in this generation, to reach people for the Lord? See, I know when Sunday night started, back in Marlow, my grandparents were factors of that. And it was an effective thing. It brought people in. But that was a long time ago. And I'm not saying that we shouldn't have Sunday night service. I'm just using this as an example of how different our preferences are. But we as a staff aren't looking for the night off. We aren't looking for an easy way out. We're looking for how can we reach Jesus Christ. And that book that Bill presented, I trust that every one of you is going to buy one of those books. Rick Warren wrote that book. And it basically tells you that there are 3 purposes of Christmas. And for those of you who are in my Wednesday night Bible study, we'll be studying that. But at the end of the book, there is this marvelous prayer that a lost person can pray to ask Jesus Christ into his or her heart. And I can't see celebrating Christmas without giving that book to my nephew, who's never made that profession of faith, but he's talked to me about it. I want to ask him to receive Jesus Christ. What we do on Sunday is try to figure out how can we reach the unchurched and the lost in new ways for Christ. You know, the older I get, I guess the easier it is to take the complaints and the murmuring. Moses led the people of Israel for 40 years through the wilderness. I've been with you for 29 years, coming up on the 30-year mark. That's why about every year I need to get away and go. I don't go to the mountain. I'm afraid I'll disappear. But I go to the beach. And it's just a nice, quiet time alone with God. And, you know, it's a great experience. And I do love you. I love you so much that you are my family. But there is absolutely no way on earth that I can do everything that every single one of you want me to do. So much of what we do in serving God is about our personal preferences. Third level of rebellion. We've gone from this just under our breath to actually talking out loud. Next level is challenging God's authority. What right does God have? This is my life. I can live it any way I want to. God doesn't own me. And notice at this point, when we begin to challenge God's authority, a lot of things start to happen. We start to question the divine creation. Did God really create me? Probably not. Is there life after death? Probably not. I'm just to live a good life here on this earth. Is there one God? Probably not. See, that all happens as we challenge God's authority. God says, I am God. I am one. I am. That's how he defined himself to Moses. This challenge appears not subtly, but very overtly. We move from those things that we prefer to those things that we think are our rights. I have a right to do this. And if my rights are not met, then I'm going to be upset. The Israelites began to feel like they had certain rights, and their rights included telling other people what to do. Somewhere along the way, Moses got married, found a wife. You'd think everybody would be happy. He brought her one day and introduced her, and the church leaders were so upset. She was a Cushite.